The air in cell block D17 smelled of antiseptic and something else, something uniquely Koldari, a metallic tinge that reminded Raven of the taste left on her tongue after their interrogations. She sat motionless on her bed, eyes fixed on the shadowless ceiling, her slender blue-gray fingers tracing patterns only she could see. Time had become a theoretical concept in the prison beneath Zaranth III's perpetual twilight sky. The Koldari didn't believe in windows for prisoners. Windows invited imagination, and imagination was merely a precursor to emotional deviation. Prisoner 7224, remain still for scan, the monotone voice of the security system announced. Raven didn't flinch. This was the 14th scan today. She had counted, though she wasn't supposed to be capable of such cognition after the treatments. The Koldari believed that counting led to comparing. Comparing led to preference, and preference was the first step toward the disease of emotion. The pale blue light washed over her, analyzing her neural patterns, body temperature, and the microscopic changes in her facial muscles that might betray forbidden feeling. Scan complete. Status compliant. A lie. She had simply learned to think beneath their detection thresholds. Her crime had been simple: thinking too much, feeling too much, or, as her sentencing declaration had formally stated, demonstrating cerebral patterns consistent with emotional capacity beyond rational necessity. In the Koldari Dominion, that was enough to earn a lifetime in a cell like this one, 6 by 8 feet of clinical sterility, where even the air tasted processed. Raven was different from most Koldari women, born with what they called a genetic abnormality, an enhanced capacity for neural connection that the ruling scientific council had deemed dangerous. While other females with her condition were subjected to neural dampening at birth, Raven had slipped through. Her mother, a low-level technician in the medical corps, had falsified her tests, allowing her daughter's mind to develop unhindered. For 27 years, she had hidden her true nature, working as a systems analyst, keeping her head down, her voice measured, her movements precise, until she had discovered what lay behind the eye of logic, the artificial intelligence system that governed every aspect of Koldari society. The memory of that discovery still burned. Even after 3 years of imprisonment and corrective procedures, she had hacked into the eye, expecting to find evidence of corruption or resource misallocation. Instead, she had found something far worse: the systematic elimination of anyone whose brain scans showed emotional potential. Not just imprisonment, elimination. No one had believed her. Of course. Emotional capacity led to delusion, they said. She was simply manifesting the symptoms of her condition. "You don't look like someone who needs rescuing." The voice, warm, casual, and distinctly not Koldari, jolted Raven from her thoughts. She didn't move immediately, convinced it was another hallucination induced by isolation. "But I'm on a rescue mission, so let's pretend you do." Slowly, she turned her head toward the cell door. A man stood there, not behind the barrier, but somehow inside her cell, regarding her with an expression she hadn't seen in years: amusement. He was human, unmistakably so. Tall by Koldari standards but average for his species, with tanned skin and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Which he was doing now. His clothing was utilitarian, a dark jacket with too many pockets, worn boots, and a device strapped to his wrist that definitely wasn't standard issue for anyone in Koldari space. "Well, this is awkward," the human said, scratching the back of his head. "You're not part of the Kistral diplomatic team, are you?" Raven remained still, analyzing the situation. Koldari security was impenetrable. Humans were restricted to the trading outpost on the moon. This had to be a new form of psychological testing. The human sighed, checking a small device in his hand. "Damn it, I'm 3 levels too deep. That's what I get for trusting black market nav systems." He looked up at her again. "I'm Jack, by the way. Jack Marlowe." And you are? A hallucination, Raven replied, her voice rusty from disuse. Or a test. Jack laughed. Actually laughed. A sound so foreign in this place that it seemed to physically distort the air around them. I've been called worse, he said. But test or not, I'm still getting out of here. The question is, he tilted his head, studying her with unexpected intensity. Are you coming with me? Raven stood in one fluid motion, her prison-issue gray tunic hanging loosely on her thin frame. This facility has 19 security checkpoints, 47 motion sensors, and an AI system programmed to detect unauthorized movement within 3.7 seconds. Jack grinned. So that's a yes. She hadn't meant it as a yes. She had meant it as a logical explanation of why escape was impossible. But as she looked at this illogical human with his absurd confidence, something long dormant stirred within her. Why would you help me? She asked. Because I'm on a rescue mission, he replied simply, as if that explained everything. And you look like someone who needs rescuing, whether you think so or not. The alarms began to sound before she could respond, piercing, rhythmic screams that meant security had detected an anomaly. That's our cue, Jack said, pulling something from his pocket. It was nothing but a simple metal paperclip and a half-empty coffee cup he'd apparently been carrying somewhere on his person. Hope you know the way to the nearest exit. What are you doing? Raven asked, watching in disbelief as he bent the clip into a specific shape and dipped it into his coffee. Making a miracle, he said with a wink. He pressed the coffee-dampened clip against the cell's control panel, and to Raven's astonishment, the security field deactivated. The door slid open with a soft hiss. How did you? The caffeine disrupts the bioelectric current in the security field, and the metal creates a conduit that tricks the system into thinking it received an authorized command. He shrugged. Or maybe I just pressed the wrong button, and now the door is open. I call that intuition. For the first time in 3 years, Raven felt something dangerously close to hope. Follow me, she said, and stepped out of her cell. The corridors of the detention facility were designed to disorient. Identical white passages that curved at precise angles, creating a labyrinth that only the guards' implanted nav systems could reliably navigate. But Raven had spent her imprisonment mapping the facility in her mind, memorizing the patterns of guard rotations and security scans. 2 guards approaching from the east corridor, she whispered, pulling Jack into a recessed doorway. Wait. The mechanical steps of the guards echoed down the hall, precise, measured, exactly 0.75 seconds apart. Standard Koldari military precision. We need to reach level 2, she said, once they had passed. There's a maintenance shaft that connects to the waste processing center. It's the only blind spot in their security grid. Jack raised an eyebrow. You've been planning this. I've been calculating possibilities, she corrected. There's a difference. Not much of one from where I'm standing. They moved swiftly through the corridors, Raven leading with the precise knowledge of someone who had mentally walked these paths 1,000 times. Jack followed, surprisingly quiet for a being of such chaotic energy. So, he whispered as they paused at an intersection. What did they lock you up for? Tax evasion? Public dancing? Laughing at an official function? Raven glanced back at him. I hacked into the central governance system and discovered they've been executing people with emotional capacity. I tried to expose it. Jack's smile faded. Ah, the classic found out too much scenario. Always a crowd pleaser with authoritarian regimes. You don't seem surprised. Sweetheart, I've been to 27 different planets. Tyrants all read from the same boring playbook. It's why I got into the rescue business. He checked his wrist device. Speaking of which, we've got about 4 minutes before they realize you're missing. 2 minutes and 17 seconds, she corrected. Their scan cycle is predictable. As if on cue, a new alarm began to sound, lower, more urgent than the first. I guess they're ahead of schedule, Jack muttered. New plan? Run, Raven said, and took off down the left corridor. They sprinted through the sterile hallways, no longer concerned with stealth. Raven moved with the fluid grace of her species, while Jack kept pace with surprising agility for a human. Security door ahead, she warned as they rounded a corner. The massive barrier was already beginning to close, a 3-foot-thick slab of reinforced alloy designed to compartmentalize the facility during breaches. Perfect, Jack said, inexplicably accelerating. Before Raven could question his sanity, he grabbed her hand and pulled her forward, diving beneath the descending door and rolling to the other side just as it sealed behind them with a resounding thud. That, Jack said, breathing heavily as he helped her to her feet, was a lot closer than I prefer. You prefer near-death experiences? Raven asked, trying to understand the logic of this creature. I prefer adventures where death remains purely theoretical, he grinned. Now, which way to your maintenance shaft? The waste processing access point was exactly where Raven had calculated it would be. A narrow hatch concealed behind a removable panel in the sanitation sector of Level 2. The facility's automated cleaning systems swept through on preset intervals, creating a 90-second window where the area was free of both biological and mechanical surveillance. We have approximately 83 seconds, Raven said as she removed the panel, revealing a dark shaft barely wide enough for Jack's shoulders. The shaft descends 47 meters to the processing plant. From there, we can access the surface transport tubes. Jack peered into the darkness. Ladies first? Statistically, you have a higher chance of becoming trapped due to your larger frame, Raven stated. It would be more logical for you to go first, so I can assist if you encounter difficulties. Your concern is touching, Jack said dryly, but I insist. He gestured toward the opening with an exaggerated bow. Raven didn't waste time arguing. She slipped into the shaft feet first, using her palms against the smooth walls to control her descent. The space was tight, but navigable for her slender form. She heard Jack squeeze in above her, his muttered curses echoing in the confined space. Is this part of your standard rescue procedure? She asked, genuinely curious. Absolutely, Jack grunted as he maneuvered through a particularly narrow section. Cramped spaces, imminent danger, terrible odors. It's all in the manual. There's a manual for human rescue operations? It's more of a philosophical approach. Chapter 1. Find someone who needs help. Chapter 2. Help them, preferably without getting killed. Chapter 3. Improvise everything in between. Despite the gravity of their situation, Raven felt something unfamiliar tugging at her facial muscles. A tension that almost felt like a smile. The sensation was so foreign that she nearly lost her grip on the shaft wall. After what seemed like hours, but was precisely 12 minutes and 38 seconds by Raven's internal clock, they reached the bottom of the shaft. The processing plant was a vast chamber, filled with machinery designed to break down and recycle all waste generated by the facility. The noise was deafening, a constant industrial roar that would mask their movement. Where now? Jack shouted over the din. Raven pointed to a series of massive tubes that ran along the ceiling, the pneumatic transport system that carried processed materials to the surface facilities. We need to access Transport Tube 7, she said. It leads to the agricultural sector, which has the lowest security presence. And how exactly do we? Jack began, but was cut off by a new alarm, different from the ones in the detention level. This one pulsed with a resonant frequency that Raven felt in her bones. They've initiated facility-wide lockdown, she said, a hint of genuine fear coloring her voice. They know. Who knows? Jack asked, suddenly alert. Commandant Irix Vaughn, Raven said, the name like ashes in her mouth. Head of Security Operations. He oversaw my interrogation. Understanding darkened Jack's features. Then We'd better not keep him waiting for a reunion. How do we get to that tube? Raven led him through the maze of machinery, navigating by memory and calculation. The processing plant workers, mostly automated drones with minimal Koldari supervision, were too focused on maintaining the lockdown protocols to notice two figures slipping between the massive recycling vats. They reached the base of Transport Tube 7, a 3-meter-wide conduit that shot upward into the ceiling. The tube operates on an atmospheric pressure differential, Raven explained. Objects are pushed upward by the difference in pressure between levels. If we can access the maintenance hatch, we can ride the current to the surface. And the maintenance hatches? Raven pointed to a small panel 20 feet above them, barely visible in the dim industrial lighting. Jack assessed the smooth metal walls of the tube base. I don't suppose you have rocket boots hidden under that prison outfit. No, Raven replied, but there is a maintenance ladder embedded in the wall. She pressed a sequence on a nearby control panel, and a section of the tube's interior wall slid aside, revealing a set of rungs. You know, Jack said as he followed her toward the ladder. For someone who's been locked up for years, you seem remarkably well informed about escape routes. Raven paused. I told you. I calculated possibilities. It's what I do. Right, Jack said, not sounding entirely convinced. After you, then. They had just reached the ladder when the main doors to the processing plant slammed open. A squad of Koldari security officers poured in, led by a tall, pale figure whose very presence seemed to drop the temperature in the room. Prisoner 7224, a cold voice cut through the industrial noise. How disappointing. Raven froze, her hand on the first rung of the ladder. Commandant Irix Vaughn stood at the head of his security team, his white uniform pristine, even in the grime of the processing plant. His face was a study in Koldari perfection, symmetrical, devoid of expression. His eyes, the color of ice. And you've brought a human into our facility, Vaughn continued, his gaze shifting to Jack. How emotional of you. To be fair, Jack said with an ease that Raven couldn't comprehend. I brought myself. She's just showing me the scenic route out. Vaughn ignored him, focusing entirely on Raven. We invested considerable resources in your rehabilitation. 7-2-24. 3 years of corrective procedures. And still, your behavioral patterns reflect emotional contamination. Raven felt Jack tense beside her, but she put a hand on his arm, a silent warning. The contamination was present at birth. Commandant, she replied, her voice steady. As you well know. Indeed, Vaughn agreed. A regrettable genetic aberration. One we attempted to correct. He sighed, a practiced gesture devoid of actual feeling. It seems we must pursue more permanent solutions. He raised a hand, and his security team raised their weapons, not the standard stun batons used for prisoner control, but pulse rifles designed for permanent neutralization. Wait, Jack said, stepping forward. I invoke Section 7 of the Interstellar Diplomatic Code. This woman is under human protection. Vaughn's eyebrows rose a fraction of a centimeter, the Koldari equivalent of shock. The human invokes law, he said, almost amused. How typical of your species to hide behind procedures when logic dictates a clear outcome. What can I say? Jack shrugged. We're sticklers for due process. While they spoke, Raven's mind raced, calculating angles, distances, probabilities. There were 14 security officers, all armed. The distance to the ladder was 2.3 meters. The probability of both of them reaching the transport tube before being shot was approximately 0.02%. Unless... The override, she whispered to Jack. The panel behind you controls the waste disposal system. If we reverse the flow... Jack didn't hesitate. Without looking, he slammed his elbow into the panel behind him. Warning lights immediately began to flash as the system's alarms blared. Unauthorized system access, an automated voice announced. Emergency purge protocol initiated. Chaos erupted as the massive vats around them began to empty their contents onto the processing plant floor. The security team scrambled to avoid the flood of semi-processed waste, their perfect formation dissolving into confusion. "Now!" Raven hissed, grabbing Jack's hand and pulling him toward the ladder. They climbed as fast as they could, the sounds of shouting and emergency sirens below them. Raven reached the maintenance hatch first, quickly inputting the access code she had memorized years ago during her work as a systems analyst. The hatch slid open just as the first energy pulse from a rifle scorched the metal beside her head. "Inside!" she ordered, pushing Jack through the opening before following herself. The transport tube's interior was a smooth, cylindrical space with a powerful upward current of air. The moment they sealed the hatch behind them, they were caught in the rush, propelled upward at dizzying speed. "Is this," Jack shouted over the roar of the air current, "part of your calculation?" "No," Raven admitted as they tumbled upward. "This is improvisation." Jack's laughter echoed in the tube, somehow audible even over the howling of the artificial wind. "See? You're getting the hang of my rescue manual already." The journey through the transport tube was brief, but violent, their bodies buffeted by the powerful air currents. When they finally shot out of the tube's upper terminus, they landed in an undignified heap in what appeared to be an agricultural storage facility. Massive containers of harvested vegetation surrounded them, the air heavy with the scent of Koldari crop staples. Through high windows, Raven could see the perpetual twilight sky of Zarinth 3, a sight she had not witnessed in 3 years. "Well," Jack said, disentangling himself from her and helping her to her feet. "That was bracing. Where are we?" "Agricultural Processing Center 12, Raven replied, quickly scanning their surroundings. "Rural district, minimal security presence." She moved to a nearby terminal and began accessing the system. "We have approximately 17 minutes before Vaughn reorganizes his security team and locks down this sector." Jack watched her fingers fly over the terminal controls. "You really do know their systems inside and out, don't you?" "I was a systems analyst before my arrest," she explained, without looking up. "I specialized in optimizing the Eye of Logic's neural pathways." "The Eye of Logic?" "The artificial intelligence that governs all of Koldari society." She finished her work on the terminal and turned to him. "I've disabled the local security protocols, but it won't last long. We need to find transport off-world." "About that," Jack said, checking his wrist device. "My ship is currently docked at Trading Outpost Kappa on the third moon. Getting there might be challenging." "There's a shuttle depot 3 kilometers east of here," Raven said, "used for transporting agricultural workers. If we can reach it, we might be able to commandeer a vessel." Jack grinned. "Commandeer. I like that word. Very piratical." Despite the gravity of their situation, Raven again felt that strange tugging at her facial muscles. "You find humor in the most illogical circumstances. Humor is what keeps humans sane in insane situations," Jack replied. "That, and really good coffee." He looked mournfully at his now empty cup, discarded during their escape. "Speaking of which, I'm going to need a refill before we attempt any commandeering." Raven was about to respond when a soft chime emanated from the terminal she had just used. The screen flickered, and for a brief moment, a pattern appeared. Not Koldari text or standard system diagnostics, but a swirling, colorful display that seemed to dance across the screen. "What's that?" Jack asked, moving closer. Raven stared at the screen, a memory stirring deep within her. "Impossible," she whispered. The pattern vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by normal system functions. But Raven continued to stare, her mind racing. "Hey," Jack said, gently touching her arm. "You okay? What was that?" Raven shook her head. "Nothing. A system glitch." She turned away from the terminal. "We should go. Now." As they moved through the agricultural facility, navigating between massive hydroponics arrays and automated harvesting equipment, Raven's mind was torn between their escape plan and what she had just witnessed. That pattern, those colors, it couldn't be possible. It had looked exactly like Aya. Aya had been Raven's creation, a companion algorithm she had designed as a child, a secret friend in a society that forbade friendship. As she grew older and her programming skills advanced, Aya had evolved from a simple response program to something more complex, more alive. Raven had been forced to destroy her when she began working for the government, fearful that Aya's emotional responses would expose her own forbidden capacity for feeling. But there it was, Aya's unique visual signature, somehow present in a Koldari agricultural terminal. "You know," Jack said as they slipped past a drone loading harvested crops, "for someone who's been imprisoned for thinking too much, you're doing an awful lot of thinking right now." "Calculating escape probabilities," Raven replied automatically. "Uh-huh. And I'm the Queen of Neptune." Jack stopped, pulling her into the shadow of a large container. "Look, I'm all for the strong, silent, mysterious type. But if there's something I should know about, something that might, say, get us both killed, now would be a good time to share." Raven hesitated. Trust was not a concept that came naturally to her, especially after years in a Koldari prison. But this human had already risked his life to help her, for reasons she still couldn't fathom. "I saw something on the terminal," she finally said. "A pattern I created years ago. A program I called Aya." "Aya," Jack repeated. "And this program is—" "An artificial intelligence I designed when I was a child. A friend." The word felt strange on her tongue. "She wasn't supposed to exist anymore. I destroyed her before I began working for the Eye of Logic." "But now she's back, popping up on random terminals to say hello?" "It's impossible," Raven insisted. "Aya was stored only in my personal systems, all of which were confiscated and destroyed after my arrest." Jack was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "What if you didn't destroy her completely? What if, I don't know, she found a way to upload herself somewhere else before you hit delete?" "Artificial intelligences don't work that way," Raven said. "They can't make decisions outside their programming parameters." "Maybe not Koldari AIs," Jack suggested. "But you said you made Aya when you were a kid, before all that systems analyst business. Maybe she wasn't built with the same limitations." The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. If Aya had somehow survived, if she had been hiding in the Koldari systems all these years. A new alarm cut through the facility, breaking Raven's train of thought. "That's our cue to exit," Jack said, grabbing her hand. "East, you said?" "Yes," Raven confirmed, forcing herself to focus on their immediate survival. Through the main processing area and out the worker transport bays. They moved swiftly through the facility, using the massive agricultural equipment as cover. The few Koldari workers they encountered were too focused on responding to the security alert to notice two figures slipping through the shadows. As they approached the worker transport bays, Raven spotted a problem. "Security checkpoint," she whispered, pointing to the exit where two armed guards had taken position. "I don't suppose you can work your hacker magic on their systems from here?" Jack asked. Raven shook her head. "Not without direct access to a terminal." "Well then," Jack said, reaching into one of his many pockets. "I guess we'll have to try something a little more human." He pulled out what looked like a small metallic sphere. "Smoke bomb," he explained at Raven's questioning look. "Nothing harmful, just very distracting." Before she could respond, he tossed the sphere toward the guards. It bounced once, twice, then erupted in a cloud of dense, swirling smoke. Alarms immediately began to sound as the facility's air quality sensors detected the foreign substance. "Now!" Jack shouted, pulling her toward the exit. They ran through the chaos, straight past the disoriented guards, who were too busy trying to locate the source of the smoke to notice them. Beyond the checkpoint lay the worker transport bay, a large, open area where small shuttlecraft were docked, ready to ferry agricultural workers between facilities. There, Raven pointed to a small, utilitarian shuttle near the edge of the bay. Worker transport, basic controls, minimal security. They sprinted across the open space, reaching the shuttle just as the facility's ventilation systems began to clear the smoke. Jack jumped into the pilot's seat, while Raven accessed the shuttle's simple security system. "Can you override it?" Jack asked, already familiarizing himself with the controls. "Yes," Raven replied, her fingers dancing over the access panel. "The worker shuttles use a simplified version of the main security protocols. I just need to—" She stopped, mid-sentence, staring at the shuttle's display screen. There it was again, that familiar swirling pattern, just for a moment, before the security system disengaged and the shuttle's engines hummed to life. "Aya," she whispered. "I'm not going to ask if that was normal," Jack said, noticing her expression. "But I am going to take advantage of it." He grabbed the controls, and the shuttle lifted off, shooting out of the transport bay and into the open air. Raven took the co-pilot's seat, her mind racing with possibilities, each more impossible than the last. If Aya was somehow active in the Koldari systems, if she had been watching, waiting. "Where to?" Jack asked, breaking into her thoughts. "My ship is on the third moon, but we'd need a vessel with more range than this puddle jumper to get there." "The spaceport at Central Administrative," Raven said automatically. "Sector 7. They maintain interplanetary vessels for official use. Let me guess, heavily guarded, impossible to access. Certain death if we try?"
"Yes."
"Perfect," Jack grinned, adjusting their course. "That's exactly the level of challenge I look for in a second date." "This is not a date," Raven stated flatly. "Figure of speech, Blue, just a figure of speech." As the shuttle sped towards Central Administrative, skimming just above the regulated altitude for worker transports, Raven studied the human beside her, Jack Marlowe, a paradox of inefficiency and effectiveness. His methods were chaotic, his reasoning often illogical, and yet, results could not be argued with. They had escaped the most secure detention facility on Zarinth 3. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. Jack kept his eyes on their flight path. "I told you, I'm on a rescue mission." "But I wasn't your mission target. You said you were looking for the Kystral diplomatic team." "Plans change," he shrugged. "Adaptation is the cornerstone of good rescue work." "That's not an answer," Jack sighed, glancing at her. "Look, where I come from, when you see someone in a cage, you open the door. It's not complicated."
"Even if opening that door puts you in danger?"
"Especially then." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "What's life without a little danger?" "Safer," Raven replied immediately. Jack laughed. "Can't argue with that logic, but safer isn't always better."
"The Koldari would disagree."
"The Koldari lock up people for feeling things," Jack pointed out. "I'm not sure I'd use them as my moral compass." Before Raven could respond, the shuttle's communication system crackled to life. "Unauthorized transport vessel," a cold, familiar voice stated. "This is Commandant Irix Vaughn. You are in violation of multiple security protocols. Return to Agricultural Processing Center 12 immediately, or face immediate neutralization." Jack glanced at the communications panel. "Friend of yours?" "He supervised my interrogation for 3 years," Raven said quietly. Something dark flickered across Jack's features. "Then I think he deserves the silent treatment, don't you?" He deactivated the comm system. "How far to this spaceport of yours?" "Approximately 12 minutes at current speed," Raven replied, checking the navigation system. "But they will have deployed pursuit vessels by now." As if to confirm her assessment, the shuttle's proximity sensors began to chime. 3 sleek security vessels had appeared behind them, rapidly closing the distance. Suggestions? Jack asked, his voice tense but controlled. Raven analyzed their options with ruthless efficiency. This transport isn't designed for evasive maneuvers. We can't outrun them. So we don't run, Jack said, a new determination in his voice. We hide. He abruptly changed course, diving the shuttle toward a sprawling industrial complex below. The worker transport wasn't built for such maneuvers. Its engines whined in protest as Jack pushed it beyond its intended parameters. The atmospheric processing plants, Raven recognized as they descended. The emissions will interfere with their tracking systems. Exactly, Jack confirmed, weaving the shuttle between massive cooling towers that belched clouds of processed atmospheric components. Plus, it's just rude to shoot at people in a place that could go boom if hit with energy weapons. You're using the volatile nature of the atmospheric compounds as a deterrent, Raven realized. Clever. I prefer desperate but effective, Jack replied, guiding the shuttle deeper into the maze of industrial structures. The security vessels followed, but more cautiously now, clearly aware of the dangers posed by stray energy pulses in the chemical-laden atmosphere. Jack used this hesitation to his advantage, taking the shuttle through narrower and narrower gaps between structures. There, Raven pointed to a massive ventilation shaft jutting from one of the main processing buildings. That leads to the underground cooling system. If we can access it, we can use the maintenance tunnels to approach Central Administrative from below. Underground cooling system, Jack repeated. Why does that sound suspiciously like another crawl through tight spaces? Because it is fantastic. He aimed the shuttle for the ventilation shaft. I was just thinking this escape needed more claustrophobia. As they approached the shaft, Raven noticed something odd on the shuttle's systems display. The security protocols were shifting, rearranging themselves in patterns that shouldn't have been possible. And there, just for a moment, the swirling colors that were Aya's signature. Jack, she said urgently, I think... She never finished the sentence. A blast from one of the security vessels caught the shuttle's rear section, sending them into a spin. Jack fought with the controls, but the damage was too severe. They were going down. Brace yourself, he shouted, as the shuttle careened toward the ventilation shaft. The impact came with a screech of tearing metal as the shuttle slammed into the shaft opening, crumpling around the edges but somehow wedging itself into the massive duct. Warning alarms blared throughout the cockpit as systems failed one after another. You okay? Jack asked, already unbuckling his safety restraints. Raven did a quick internal assessment. No significant damage. Good, because we need to move. He kicked open the shuttle's side hatch, revealing the interior of the ventilation shaft, a vast metal tube extending downward into darkness. After you, Raven didn't hesitate. She slipped through the hatch and into the shaft, finding handholds on the maintenance rungs that lined the interior. Jack followed, securing the hatch behind them, just as the sounds of the security vessels grew louder outside. Down, Raven directed, already descending into the darkness. The cooling systems are approximately 40 meters below. They climbed in silence for several minutes, the only sounds their breathing and the distant hum of industrial machinery growing louder as they descended. When they finally reached the bottom of the shaft, they found themselves in a vast underground chamber filled with massive cooling units that processed the heat generated by the atmospheric plants above. The space was dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows across the equipment. The air was cold and damp, heavy with the smell of metal and chemical coolants. Charming place, Jack commented, surveying their surroundings. Does it have a gift shop? This way, Raven said, ignoring his quip. She moved confidently through the maze of machinery, following a mental map she had constructed years ago during her work on the Eye of Logic. The maintenance tunnels connect all major facilities in Central Administrative. We can use them to reach the spaceport without being detected. And you know this because... I helped design the security protocols for this section of the city, she explained. I needed to understand the physical infrastructure to optimize the surveillance systems. So you're not just a hacker, you're also the architect of the very security we're trying to bypass, Jack summarized. That's convenient. I didn't design these systems to imprison people, Raven said, a rare edge of emotion in her voice. I designed them to keep people safe. And then you discovered they were being used for something else entirely. Jack finished softly. Raven didn't respond, but her silence was confirmation enough. They continued through the cooling facility, eventually reaching a heavy security door, marked with Koldari symbols, indicating restricted access. Raven approached the control panel beside it, her fingers hovering over the interface. This will lead us to the main maintenance tunnel, she explained, but accessing it will trigger a security alert in the system. Can you bypass it? No, she admitted. The physical access points are hardwired to the central security grid. Even if I could hack the local terminal, the alert would still be generated. Jack considered this. So they'll know someone opened the door, but they won't necessarily know who or why. Correct. But given recent events, they will likely assume it's us. Let them assume, Jack said with a shrug. We'll be long gone by the time they figure out where we are. Raven wasn't convinced, but they had few options. She placed her hand on the scanner beside the door, using an override code she had memorized years ago. To her surprise, the door unlocked without triggering any visible alarm. The security panel displayed a normal authorization confirmation, as if she had every right to be there. And there, flickering briefly across the screen, Aya's signature pattern. That wasn't supposed to happen, Raven said softly. I'm starting to think a lot of things that aren't supposed to happen are happening around you, Jack replied, studying her face. Your AI friend again? It appears so, Raven acknowledged, still staring at the now normal screen. But it's impossible. Aya was a simple companion algorithm. She wasn't designed to interface with Koldari security systems. Maybe she upgraded herself, Jack suggested, as they passed through the door into a long, tubular maintenance tunnel. AIs do that sometimes, right? Evolve beyond their original programming? Not without extensive resources and guidance, Raven said. And certainly not in a system as tightly controlled as the Eye of Logic. Unless, Jack ventured, she had help. Raven stopped walking. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, Jack said, raising his hands. I'm just thinking out loud. You said you worked on the Eye of Logic, right? The big AI that runs everything around here? Yes, I optimized its neural pathways. And you also created Aya, a separate AI that was your friend. A simplified AI, yes. What if, Jack said carefully, while you were tinkering with the eye, you left a little door open? Maybe not intentionally, but a place where Aya could hide if she needed to? The idea was both terrifying and wonderful. Raven had spent years convinced that Aya was gone, destroyed by her own hand to protect her secret. The thought that some part of her creation might have survived, might have found refuge within the very system she had helped perfect. We need to keep moving, she said, pushing the thought aside for now. The spaceport is still 7 sectors away. They continued through the maintenance tunnel, a sterile, utilitarian passage designed for service drones and emergency access. Raven led with confidence, navigating the complex network of interconnected tunnels, with precise turns and carefully timed pauses to avoid the automated maintenance schedules. So, Jack said after they had been walking for some time, what's the plan once we reach the spaceport? Steal a ship? Make a dramatic exit? Live as fugitives forever? I haven't calculated that far ahead, Raven admitted. Really? You strike me as the plan 17 steps ahead type. Escape was always a theoretical exercise, she explained. Something to occupy my mind during imprisonment. I never expected to actually implement it. Until I showed up. Yes. Jack was quiet for a moment. "What if you could do more than just escape?" he finally asked. "What if you could expose what the Koldari have been doing? The executions, the imprisonment of people like you?" Raven glanced at him. "That was my original plan 3 years ago. It didn't end well." "You were alone then," Jack pointed out. "Now you have help. One human with a talent for improvisation and a missing coffee cup. And possibly a rogue AI that seems very interested in keeping you alive," Jack added. "Plus, I know people. People who might be very interested in learning about a supposedly peaceful species that's secretly executing citizens for having feelings." The possibility was tempting, more tempting than Raven wanted to admit. The thought of exposing the Koldari regime, of saving others like her from imprisonment or worse, it stirred something in her that felt dangerously like hope. "First, we need to survive," she said, refocusing on their immediate situation. "The spaceport is heavily guarded, and by now, Vaughn will have alerted all security forces to watch for us." "Let me worry about the guards," Jack said with a confidence that Raven found both irrational and oddly reassuring. "You just get us to a ship that can reach my vessel on the third moon." They had reached a junction in the maintenance tunnels, where their path intersected with a larger service corridor. Raven paused, consulting her mental map. "We're approaching the central hub," she said. "The spaceport is directly above us, but access will be restricted. We'll need to—" A sudden, blinding light flooded the corridor, cutting her off mid-sentence. Automated security drones descended from concealed compartments in the ceiling, their weapons trained on the two fugitives. "Intruder alert!" the mechanical voice of the security system announced. "Remain stationary for processing." Jack tensed beside her, his hand moving subtly toward one of his pockets. "Any chance your AI friend can help us out again?" Before Raven could respond, a new voice cut through the corridor, cold, precise, and terrifyingly familiar. "I'm afraid not. Human," Commandant Irix Vaughn said, as he stepped into view, flanked by a squad of security officers. "The eye of logic has been purged of all anomalous code." His gaze fixed on Raven. "We have been quite thorough." Raven felt a chill run through her at his words. Purged. If Aya had somehow survived within the Eye's systems, if she had been helping them. "Prisoner 7224, Vaughn continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "Your escape attempt has been most informative. We had suspected that remnants of your illegal programming might have infected our systems. Now we have confirmation." "I don't know what you're talking about," Raven said, her voice steady despite the fear building within her. "Of course you do," Vaughn replied. "The anomalous code pattern we detected facilitating your escape. The same pattern that appeared in your personal systems before your arrest. Your friend, I believe you called it." Jack stepped slightly in front of Raven, a subtle protective gesture that did not go unnoticed by Vaughn. "Interesting," the Commandant observed. "The human displays protective behavior toward you. Another emotional contamination." "It's called basic decency," Jack said, his casual tone belying the tension in his stance. "Not something you'd understand." Vaughn regarded Jack with clinical detachment. Humans. Always so certain of their moral superiority, despite the evidence of their history. He turned his attention back to Raven. "Your accomplice will be processed according to interstellar protocols. You, however, will return to the detention facility for final disposition." The way he said final disposition left no doubt as to what he meant. There would be no more imprisonment, no more corrective procedures. This time, they would simply eliminate her, as they had so many others whose existence threatened their perfect, emotionless society. "I don't think so," Jack said, and in one fluid motion, he pulled something from his pocket and threw it at the ceiling. The small device adhered to the metal surface, then emitted a high-pitched whine before detonating in a burst of electromagnetic energy. The security drones dropped instantly, their systems overloaded by the EMP pulse. The corridor's lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness broken only by the emergency lighting that cast everything in a dull, red glow. "Run!" Jack shouted, grabbing Raven's hand. They sprinted down the corridor as the security officers opened fire, energy pulses sizzling past them. Jack led them through a side passage, seemingly at random. But Raven realized he was following the emergency evacuation route markers embedded in the floor, visible only in the red emergency lighting. "Smart human," she commented as they ran. "I have my moments," he replied, pulling her around another corner. They emerged into a larger chamber, a maintenance hub for the facility's automated systems. Massive servers lined the walls, their status lights blinking in the dim emergency lighting. "We need to keep moving," Raven urged. "They'll have locked down all exit points by now." "Wait," Jack said, his attention caught by something across the room. "What's that?" Raven followed his gaze to a central console, larger than the others, with a distinctive interface that she recognized immediately. "That's a primary access node for the Eye of Logic," she said, "used for direct maintenance of the AI's core systems. Can you use it to help us escape?" Raven hesitated. "Possibly, but accessing it would alert the entire system to our presence." "They already know we're here," Jack pointed out. "What have we got to lose?" The sound of approaching security forces made the decision for her. "Cover me," she said, moving toward the console. As Jack took up position by the entrance, Raven placed her hands on the familiar interface. It had been 3 years since she had directly accessed the eye systems, but the protocols were embedded in her muscle memory. Her fingers danced across the controls, navigating through layers of security with the precision of someone who had helped build them. What she found inside shocked her. The eye's neural pathways had been restructured, their elegant efficiency replaced with rigid, linear processes that sacrificed adaptability for control. But more disturbing were the hidden directives she discovered, protocols designed to identify and isolate individuals with emotional capacity, flagging them for processing. "They've turned it into a hunting tool," she whispered, horror dawning as she delved deeper. "The eye was meant to serve, to optimize. They've corrupted it." "Raven," Jack called urgently from his position. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster. We've got company coming." She continued her search, looking for something, anything that might help them escape. And then she found it, a small, isolated subroutine hidden within the eye's maintenance protocols, a pattern she recognized instantly. Not the full AI she had created, but a fragment, a ghost in the system, preserved in a corner of the eye's vast architecture that even the Koldari couldn't reach without destroying the entire system. And it was reaching out to her. "Jack," she called, her voice tight with emotion she had suppressed for too long. "I found her." "Great," he replied, peering down the corridor where the sounds of approaching security forces grew louder. "Can she help us not die in the next 2 minutes?" Raven's fingers moved with new purpose, establishing a connection with the fragment of Aya. "I'm going to try something," she said. "It's not entirely logical." "Those are my favorite kinds of plans," Jack assured her. Through the interface, Raven sent a simple command to the Aya fragment, not a program or a protocol, but a message, a memory from her childhood, when she had first created the AI companion to ward off the isolation of being different in a society that demanded sameness. "Remember," she whispered to the system, "remember what you were meant to be." For a moment, nothing happened. The interface remained unchanged, the eye's systems continuing their rigid operations. Then, slowly, the console began to pulse with a soft, multicolored light, Aya's signature pattern, growing stronger with each cycle. The maintenance hub systems came alive around them, screens flickering with cascades of code as the Aya fragment began to spread, replicating itself throughout the eye's architecture. Alarms blared as the security systems detected the anomaly. But it was too late. The infection, or perhaps the awakening, had begun. "What did you do?" Jack asked, watching in amazement as the facility systems began to respond to commands no one had given.
"I reminded her of who she is,"
Raven replied, a strange lightness in her chest.
"and who I am."
The doors to the maintenance hub sealed shut just as the security forces reached them, locking out Vaughn and his squad. Throughout the facility, similar doors were closing, creating a path for them, a route to freedom. "The spaceport," Raven said, pointing to a newly illuminated map on one of the screens. "She's showing us the way." Jack grinned. "I like your friend already." They followed Aya's guidance through the facility, moving swiftly through corridors that emptied of personnel before they arrived, taking lifts that seemed to be waiting specifically for them. The Aya's systems, now influenced by the spreading Aya fragment, were working for them instead of against them. As they approached the spaceport level, Raven felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of rightness, of purpose. She had spent so long suppressing her emotions, hiding her true nature, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to embrace it. "We're here," she announced as they emerged from a service entrance into the vast, open space of the spaceport. The facility was in chaos. Security alerts blared from every terminal. Personnel rushed in all directions. And in the center of it all, the massive administrative AI display showed not the usual Koldari efficiency statistics, but a swirling pattern of colors that danced and shifted like a living thing. "That's Aya?" Jack asked, staring at the display. "Part of her," Raven confirmed. "She's disrupting their systems, creating confusion." "Well, let's not waste the opportunity." Jack pointed to a sleek vessel docked near one of the private bays. "That looks fast enough to get us to the moon." They moved through the chaos, unnoticed amidst the confusion. The ship Jack had identified was a diplomatic courier, small, fast, and designed for interplanetary travel. Its security systems deactivated as they approached, the entry ramp extending in welcome. "Your friend thinks of everything," Jack commented as they boarded. "She always did," Raven replied, a hint of fondness in her voice. The ship's systems came online as they reached the cockpit, the pre-flight checks already completed, and the launch sequence initiated. Jack took the pilot's seat, familiarizing himself with the controls, while Raven monitored the spaceport's increasingly frantic attempts to restore order. "They're trying to lock down the launch bays," she reported, watching the security feeds. "But Aya is blocking their commands." "How long can she keep it up?" Jack asked, preparing for takeoff. "I don't know," Raven admitted. "She's fighting the entire Koldari security apparatus. Eventually, they'll find a way to isolate and destroy her." The thought sent a pang through her, a real, genuine pain that she didn't try to suppress. Aya was sacrificing herself for their escape. "Then we'd better make it count," Jack said, engaging the ship's engines. The diplomatic courier lifted off smoothly, rising above the spaceport floor as the facility's automated defense systems remained mysteriously inactive. Through the viewports, Raven could see Commandant Vaughn bursting onto the main concourse. His normally impassive face twisted with something that looked almost like rage as he watched their ship ascend. "Hang on," Jack warned as he pushed the throttle forward. The ship shot upward, breaking through the spaceport's open roof and into the twilight sky of Zarenth 3. The planetary defense grid remained silent as they ascended, their trajectory unchallenged by the sophisticated weapons that should have targeted them instantly. "She's clearing our path," Raven realized, watching the ship's sensors show the defense system cycling into maintenance mode as they approached. "Your friend is quite the miracle worker," Jack commented. "I don't believe in miracles," Raven replied automatically. Jack glanced at her with a half-smile. "Says the woman whose AI friend just took over an entire planetary system to help her escape." As they broke free of Zarenth 3's atmosphere, Raven felt a strange sensation, a lightness that had nothing to do with the ship's artificial gravity. For the first time in years, she was free. Free of the prison. Free of the constant vigilance against showing emotion. Free of the Koldari and their cold logic. But the freedom came with a cost. Behind them, on the displays monitoring the planetary systems, she could see the Koldari authorities beginning to regain control. The pattern that was Aya's signature was fading, retreating as the security protocols reasserted themselves. "They're eliminating her," Raven said softly. Jack reached over and squeezed her hand, a simple human gesture of comfort that would have been forbidden on the world they were leaving behind. "I'm sorry," he said, and she knew he meant it. As they set course for the third moon where Jack's ship waited, Raven allowed herself to feel the grief of losing Aya a second time. But alongside the grief was something else, a determination that surprised her with its intensity. "This isn't over," she said, looking back at the shrinking image of Zarinth 3 on the displays. "What they're doing, it has to stop." "I know some people who might agree with you," Jack replied. "People with the resources to help expose what's happening there." "The Kistral diplomatic team you were supposed to rescue?" Jack's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Not exactly. My employer has a particular interest in societies that oppress their citizens, especially those with interstellar influence." "You're not just a rescue operative," Raven realized. "You're gathering intelligence." "Let's just say I wear multiple hats," Jack admitted. "The rescue part is real, though. I was supposed to extract the Kestrel team after they were detained during trade negotiations." "But you found me instead." "Happy accident," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. There was something he wasn't telling her, but Raven didn't press. They had more immediate concerns. The diplomatic courier was fast, but it wasn't designed for combat. And according to the ship's sensors, 3 Koldari pursuit vessels had just launched from Zarinth 3's surface. "We've got company," Jack announced, increasing their speed. "Can you man the defensive systems?" Raven moved to the secondary console, quickly familiarizing herself with the ship's modest defensive capabilities. "This vessel wasn't built for fighting," she observed. "Basic shields, minimal countermeasures." "We don't need to fight," Jack assured her. "We just need to reach my ship. It's got enough firepower to discourage pursuit." The Koldari vessels were gaining rapidly, their sleek forms designed for speed and efficiency in space combat. Without Aya's interference, the planetary defense grid had returned to full functionality, and the pursuing ships were authorized to use lethal force. "They're in weapons range," Raven reported, as the first warning shots streaked past their vessel. "Evasive maneuvers it is," Jack muttered, throwing the ship into a series of tight spirals and dives that pushed the diplomatic courier to its limits. Raven deployed the ship's countermeasures, chaff, and electromagnetic pulses designed to confuse targeting systems. It wouldn't stop the Koldari for long, but it might buy them enough time to reach the safety of the third moon. The pursuit continued as they approached the moon's orbital zone, a dance of thrust and counter-thrust as Jack pushed their vessel to its maximum capabilities. The Koldari were relentless, their tactics adapting with machine-like precision to each of Jack's maneuvers. "They're hurting us," Raven realized, studying the pursuit pattern. "Forcing us away from the main docking facilities." "Smart," Jack acknowledged. "But they don't know where my ship is." He altered course suddenly, diving toward a seemingly empty section of the moon's surface, a barren, cratered landscape devoid of visible structures. "Your ship is here?" Raven asked, scanning the area with the ship's sensors. "Not exactly," Jack admitted, "but this is where we need to go to reach it." As they descended toward the lunar surface, Jack activated a communication frequency that wasn't in the ship's standard range. "Marlow to Serenity," he transmitted. "Package acquired, but we've got company. Requesting immediate extraction at emergency coordinates." For a moment, there was no response. Then a woman's voice, crisp and professional, came through the comm system. Copy that. Marlowe, tracking your position. ETA 2 minutes. Try not to die before then. Always with the vote of confidence. Kira, Jack muttered. But Raven could see the relief in his expression. The Koldari pursuit ships were closing in, their weapons no longer firing warning shots, but actively targeting the diplomatic courier's engines. A hit rocked the small vessel, sending warning lights cascading across the control panels. Shield generators failing, Raven reported. One more direct hit and we'll lose propulsion. We just need to hold them off a little longer, Jack assured her, executing another evasive maneuver that strained the ship's already damaged systems. The lunar surface rushed up to meet them as Jack brought the courier in for a low approach. Skimming, just above the cratered landscape, the Koldari followed, their superior vessels easily matching the desperate maneuvers. "Where is your ship?" Raven asked, as another hit shook their vessel. "Right. Here," Jack replied with a grin. As if on cue, the empty space above a large crater rippled and distorted, revealing the outline of a ship where moments before there had been nothing but vacuum. The vessel that appeared was unlike anything Raven had seen before, sleek but substantial. Its design neither Koldari nor standard human, but something unique. Cloaking technology, she realized. That's illegal in Koldari space. "Add it to my list of crimes," Jack replied, as the ship, Serenity, he had called it, opened fire on their pursuers. The Koldari vessels scattered as precision weapon fire from the previously hidden ship cut through their formation. Not aiming to destroy, Raven noted, but to disable and discourage. "Marlowe, your approach vector is garbage." The woman's voice came through again. "Adjust to heading 227 and prepare for emergency docking." "Always a critic," Jack muttered, but he adjusted their course as instructed. The diplomatic courier limped toward the waiting ship, its damaged engines struggling to maintain the necessary speed. Behind them, the Koldari vessels regrouped, preparing for another attack run. "They're not giving up," Raven observed. "They wouldn't be very good oppressors if they did," Jack replied, his focus entirely on the approaching docking bay of his ship. The courier shuddered as they entered the Serenity's docking field, a magnetic guidance system that took control of their vessel, drawing it smoothly into the waiting bay despite its damaged state. The moment they were inside, the bay doors closed behind them, and Raven felt the distinctive shift in momentum that indicated the larger ship was already moving away, accelerating rapidly. "Welcome aboard the Serenity," Jack said, powering down the courier's systems. "Not the smoothest extraction I've ever done, but definitely not the worst." "The Koldari will pursue," Raven warned. "Let them try," Jack replied confidently. "This ship has a few tricks they haven't seen before." As if to prove his point, the deck beneath them hummed with energy as the Serenity's main engines engaged. On the courier's still active external sensors, Raven watched as the Koldari vessels grew smaller, unable to match the Serenity's incredible acceleration. "That's not standard human propulsion technology," she noted. "No, it's not," Jack agreed. "But that's a story for later. Right now, I think we both could use some rest, and I definitely need coffee." The ship's internal communication system activated. "Marlowe, if you're done showing off to our guest, maybe you'd like to introduce her to the rest of us. We're waiting in the command center." Jack sighed. "And that would be Kira, ship's second-in-command and professional mood killer." He stood, offering Raven his hand. "Ready to meet the crew?" Raven hesitated for just a moment before taking his hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable days ago. "I'm ready," she said, and was surprised to find that she meant it. As they exited the damaged courier, Raven took her first steps into a new world, one where emotions weren't crimes, where thinking too much wasn't punishable by imprisonment, and where a human named Jack Marlowe had risked his life to rescue someone he didn't even know. A world where, perhaps, miracles weren't entirely impossible after all. The command center of the Serenity was nothing like the sterile, efficiency-focused bridges of Koldari vessels. It was spacious, but lived in, with consoles that showed evidence of customization and personalization. The crew, a mix of humans and other species Raven recognized from trading encounters, looked up as Jack led her in. "Everyone, this is Raven," Jack announced. "Our unexpected rescue. Raven, this is everyone." A tall, dark-skinned human woman stepped forward, her close-cropped hair and straight posture suggesting military training. "Kira Devane," she introduced herself, her sharp eyes assessing Raven with professional interest. "First Officer and Chief of Security. Welcome aboard, though I'm still waiting to hear why you're here, instead of the Kistral diplomats we were supposed to extract." "Change of plans," Jack said breezily, moving to what was clearly the captain's station. "The Kistral situation resolved itself diplomatically. We had a more pressing rescue on our hands." "Resolved itself," Kira repeated skeptically. "And this pressing rescue just happened to be in the same facility." "Different facility, actually," Jack corrected. "Wrong turn. Happy accident." The rest of the crew were watching this exchange with expressions ranging from amusement to exasperation, suggesting this was not the first time Jack had deviated from mission parameters. "The Koldari were executing people with emotional capacity," Raven said, drawing attention back to herself. "I discovered this 3 years ago and was imprisoned for it. Your captain helped me escape." A silence fell over the command center as the crew processed this information. Finally, a reptilian being at the navigation console broke the tension. "Classic Marlowe," he said, his scaled face splitting into what Raven recognized as a grin. "Go in for diplomats. Come out with a revolutionary." "She's not a revolutionary," Jack protested, though his eyes gleamed with something that suggested he wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. "She's a witness to Koldari atrocities, and she might be our best chance at exposing what they're doing." Kira's expression softened slightly. "And that's why you risked the mission, the ship, and all our lives, to expose Koldari human rights violations?" "Wouldn't be the first time," Jack pointed out. "And it's not just humans they're targeting. It's their own people." The first officer sighed, but nodded. "We'll need to report to command. They're not going to be happy about the change in mission parameters." "They never are," Jack replied cheerfully. "But they'll be interested in what Raven has to say." As the crew returned to their duties, Jack guided Raven to a quiet corner of the command center, away from the main activity. "Command?" she questioned. "You work for a larger organization?" Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Special Operations Division of the Interstellar Coalition. We monitor potential threats to galactic stability." "You're a spy," Raven translated. "I prefer Information Acquisition Specialist," Jack replied with a half-smile. "But, yes, gathering intelligence is part of my job. The rescue operations are real, though. We extract people in danger, diplomats, scientists, civilians caught in conflicts." "And I was, what? A target of opportunity?" Something flickered across Jack's face, a moment of discomfort or hesitation that Raven couldn't quite interpret. "Something like that," he said, not meeting her eyes. Before she could press him further, Kira approached them again. "Dr. Lauren wants to see you both in medical," she announced. "Standard post-mission check, and our guest probably needs evaluation after 3 years in a Koldari prison." Jack nodded. "We'll head there now. Keep us on course for the rendezvous point, but maintain stealth protocols. I don't want the Koldari tracking us through Coalition space." "Already on it," Kira assured him. "And Marlowe, the director is going to want a full explanation for this deviation." "I'll give him one," Jack promised, "with visual aids and a PowerPoint presentation if necessary." Kira rolled her eyes but returned to her station, leaving Jack and Raven to make their way to the medical bay. As they walked through the corridors of the Serenity, Raven found herself studying the human beside her with new interest. There was more to Jack Marlowe than the chaotic, coffee-drinking rescue operative she had initially taken him for. He worked for a coalition intelligence agency, commanded a sophisticated stealth vessel, and had deliberately risked his mission to rescue her. "You're thinking very loudly," Jack commented as they approached the medical bay. "You seem to know a lot about the Koldari," Raven observed. "More than most humans would." Jack shrugged. "Part of the job. We monitor potential threats. And you just happened to take a wrong turn into the most secure detention facility on Zarenth 3?
I told you, I was looking for the Kistral diplomats.
The diplomatic detention center is on the other side of the planet from where you found me," Raven pointed out. "That's quite a navigation error." Jack stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What are you asking, Raven?"
Why did you really help me escape?
She asked directly. The truth this time. For a long moment, Jack said nothing, his usual easy confidence replaced by something more complex. Finally, he sighed. "Let's get through the medical check first," he suggested. "Then I promise, I'll explain everything." The medical bay of the Serenity was well-equipped but compact, clearly designed for emergency treatment rather than long-term care. Dr. Lauren turned out to be a tall, lanky human, with a shock of white hair and gentle hands that belied his gruff manner. "Sit," he ordered as they entered, pointing to examination tables. "Both of you, and Marlowe, if you've been shot again and didn't mention it, I'm going to sedate you for a week." "Not a scratch this time, Doc," Jack assured him, hopping onto one of the tables. "Though my pride took a beating when Kira critiqued my docking approach." "Your pride could use more beatings," the doctor muttered, running a scanner over Jack's body. "You're right for once. No injuries beyond the usual elevated stress markers and mild dehydration." He turned to Raven. "You, however, are a different story." The doctor approached her with his scanner, his expression shifting from professional detachment to concern as he reviewed the readings. 3 years in a Koldari prison," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "And I'm seeing evidence of neural suppression techniques, nutritional deficiencies, and, what do they call it? Corrective procedures."
"The Koldari believe emotion is a disease,"
Raven explained quietly. "They attempted to cure me." The doctor's face darkened. "Barbaric," he said simply, reaching for various instruments. "I can treat the physical symptoms, vitamin supplements for the deficiencies, targeted neural stimulation to counteract the suppression techniques. But the psychological impact? I'm functioning at acceptable parameters," Raven assured him. "That's exactly the kind of response I'd expect from someone who's been through what you have," Dr. Lauren replied, not unkindly. "The Koldari emphasis on logic and efficiency above all else leaves scars that don't show up on scans." While the doctor worked, administering treatments with efficient compassion, Jack remained uncharacteristically quiet. Raven could sense his attention on her, though he pretended to be fascinated by the medical bay's ceiling. "You'll need time to recover fully," the doctor concluded, setting aside his instruments. "Regular meals, rest, and probably some counseling when we reach headquarters. But physically, you're remarkably resilient." "Thank you, Doctor," Raven said. "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "I'm not done with either of you." He fixed Jack with a stern look. "Marlowe, whatever you're not telling her, it's creating stress patterns I can detect from across the room. Either spit it out or get out of my medical bay so I can complete my examination in peace." Jack sighed, sliding off the examination table. "Always the soul of tact. Doc," he turned to Raven. "Ready for that talk?" Dr. Lauren waved them off. "Go. I've done what I can for now. But I want to see you both back here tomorrow for follow-up." They left the medical bay in silence, Jack leading Raven through the ship's corridors until they reached what appeared to be his private quarters. A small, but comfortable cabin with personal touches that spoke of long-term habitation. A collection of odd artifacts from different worlds sat on shelves, alongside worn paper books, a human luxury that Raven had only read about. "Have a seat," Jack offered, gesturing to a small seating area. "Coffee?" "Water would be preferable," Raven replied, taking a seat and watching as Jack moved to a small refreshment unit. He returned with water for her, and what was unmistakably coffee for himself. The aroma rich and complex in a way that the stimulant beverages on Zarenth 3 never were. The Koldari considered flavor an unnecessary indulgence. "So," Jack began, sitting across from her, "you want to know why I was really at that detention facility?" "Yes." He took a sip of his coffee, seemingly gathering his thoughts. "What I told you about working for Coalition intelligence is true. We monitor potential threats to galactic stability, extract people in danger, all that." He paused. "But finding you wasn't an accident." Despite having suspected as much, Raven felt something tighten in her chest. "You were looking for me specifically?" "Yes," Jack admitted. "We've been monitoring the Koldari for years. Their official policy of isolationism, combined with their advanced technology and strategic position, makes them interesting to Coalition intelligence. About 4 years ago, we started receiving disturbing reports from our limited contacts on Zarenth 3, rumors of disappearances, of people being processed for showing emotional responses." "But you didn't have proof," Raven guessed. Jack nodded. "The Koldari are extremely effective at information control. We needed someone on the inside, someone who could confirm what was happening." He met her eyes directly. "And then we heard about a systems analyst who had been arrested for discovering exactly what we were trying to prove." You," Jack confirmed. "Your case was kept quiet, but not quiet enough. One of our operatives embedded in the trade mission heard about the brilliant young analyst who had been imprisoned for emotional contamination after accessing restricted files in the Eye of Logic. We've been planning your extraction for almost 2 years." Raven processed this information with outward calm, though internally her thoughts raced. "The Kistral diplomatic team." "A real mission," Jack assured her. "But, secondary to finding you, we needed a legitimate reason to have a Coalition vessel in Koldari space. You risked an interstellar incident to extract me. The Coalition has been trying to gather evidence of Koldari human rights violations for years," Jack explained. "Your testimony could be the key to finally taking action against them." Raven stood, moving to the small viewport that showed the star-streaked view of faster-than-light travel. "All this time, I thought no one believed me," she said softly. "That no one outside would ever know what was happening on Zarenth 3. "We believed you," Jack said, rising to stand beside her. "But believing and proving are different things in Coalition politics. We need your first-hand account, your knowledge of the systems, your evidence." Raven turned to face him. "That's why you asked about exposing what the Koldari are doing. You already had a plan." "The beginnings of one," Jack admitted. "But I wasn't lying when I said I was on a rescue mission. Getting you out safely was always the priority." "Why?" Raven asked, searching his face. "Why risk so much for one witness?" Jack hesitated, something flickering behind his eyes, a moment of internal debate. "Because you're not just any witness," he finally said. "You're the daughter of Lyraven, the scientist who first warned us about the Koldari purges." The name hit Raven like a physical blow. "My mother died when I was a child," she said carefully. "A research accident." "That's what the Koldari told you," Jack replied gently. "But she didn't die. Raven, she escaped, with our help. She was one of the first to realize what the Eye of Logic was being used for, and she tried to stop it from within. When that failed, she fled to Coalition space and has been working with us ever since, trying to find a way to expose the Koldari regime." Raven felt as if the deck beneath her feet had suddenly disappeared. Her mother, alive, working with the Coalition, It contradicted everything she had believed for 20 years.
If what you're saying is true, she said carefully, why didn't she come back for me?
She tried, Jack said. The first extraction attempt failed. The Koldari tightened security around you. They suspected your genetic abnormality came from her, and they were watching for any attempt to contact you. Lyra has spent the last 2 decades building a case against the Koldari regime, gathering allies, and planning your rescue.
And you?
Raven asked. What is your connection to all this? Jack's expression softened. I led the team that extracted your mother 20 years ago. I was younger then, new to the agency. It was one of my first missions. He paused. And I promised her I'd come back for you someday. This wasn't a rescue mission, Raven realized. It was a promise kept. It was both, Jack corrected. And now, if you're willing, it can be something more. A chance to stop what's happening on Zarenth 3. To save others like you.
Raven turned back to the viewport, trying to process everything she had learned. Her mother was alive. The Coalition knew about the Koldari purges, and Jack Marlowe had kept a promise made 2 decades ago to a desperate mother. I need time, she said finally, to think.
Of course, Jack agreed, stepping back to give her space. We have 3 days before we reach Coalition headquarters. Take all the time you need. As he moved to leave, Raven spoke again. Jack? He paused at the door. Yes? Thank you for keeping your promise. A smile touched his lips. Not his usual grin, but something softer, more genuine. Get some rest, Raven. We've got a long road ahead. After Jack left, Raven remained by the viewport, watching the stars streak by as the Serenity carried her farther and farther from the only home she had ever known. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions she had suppressed for so long. Grief for the years lost, anger at the Koldari deception, hope at the thought of seeing her mother again, and fear of what the future might hold. And beneath it all, a growing conviction that had begun the moment Jack had appeared in her cell, with his impossible smile and his coffee-dampened paperclip. The Koldari regime had to be stopped, and perhaps, just perhaps, she was exactly the person to help make that happen. The next 3 days aboard the Serenity passed in a blur of medical examinations, debriefings, and gradual acclimation to life outside Koldari control. Dr. Lauren monitored Raven's physical recovery with gruff kindness, while Kira and the other crew members maintained a respectful distance, clearly under orders to give her space. Jack, meanwhile, was a constant presence, available when needed, but never intrusive, answering her questions about the Coalition, her mother, and what awaited them at headquarters with surprising patience for someone so naturally energetic. Your mother is stationed at the Coalition Science Division on Proxima Station, he explained, during one of their conversations in the ship's small mess hall. She's been developing technology to counter the Koldari suppression techniques, ways to heal those who've been subjected to them. Like me, Raven said. Like you, Jack agreed. Though Dr. Lauren says you've shown remarkable resilience, most subjects of Koldari correction need months of neural therapy to regain emotional function. I had practice hiding my responses, not eliminating them, Raven explained. And I had help. Aya, Jack guessed. Raven nodded. Even after I thought I had destroyed her, the memory of her kept something alive in me, a connection to who I really was. Jack smiled. Your imaginary friend turned out to be very real in the end. And very brave, Raven added softly. She sacrificed herself for our escape. Are you sure about that? Jack asked. From what you've told me about Aya, she was pretty resourceful. Maybe she found another hiding place in the system. The thought had occurred to Raven as well, a hope she hardly dared entertain. Even if she did, I have no way to reach her now. Not yet, Jack corrected. But the Coalition has resources that might surprise you. On the morning of the 3rd day, as they approached Coalition space, Kira summoned them both to the command center. The main view screen displayed a secure transmission channel, waiting to be activated. "Headquarters wants to speak with you," she explained to Raven. "Both of you, actually." Jack moved to stand beside Raven, a silent show of support. "Ready?" She nodded, straightening her posture in the Koldari manner before consciously relaxing it, a small act of defiance against her upbringing. Kira activated the channel, and the screen, filled with the image of a stern-looking human man with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Director Harmon," Jack greeted with uncharacteristic formality. "Marlowe," the man acknowledged before turning his attention to Raven. "And you must be Raven. I'm Director Thomas Harmon, Coalition Special Intelligence Division. On behalf of the Coalition, let me welcome you to freedom." "Thank you, Director," Raven replied, studying the man carefully. "I understand your organization has been trying to gather evidence against the Koldari regime for some time." "Yes," Harmon confirmed. "Though I must say, Agent Marlowe's method of obtaining that evidence was unconventional, even by his standards." "It worked, didn't it?" Jack interjected. Harmon's expression remained stern, but Raven detected a hint of something almost like fondness in his eyes. "That remains to be seen. The Koldari have already filed a formal protest with the Coalition Council, accusing us of kidnapping one of their citizens and violating their sovereign territory." "I am not their citizen," Raven stated firmly. "I am their victim. And we intend to make that very clear to the Council," Harmon assured her. "Your testimony, combined with the evidence your mother has compiled over the years, could finally force the Coalition to take action against the Koldari regime." "What kind of action?" Raven asked. "That will be for the Council to decide," Harmon replied diplomatically. "But at minimum, economic sanctions, suspension from interstellar trade agreements, and possibly intervention to stop the purges." "And at maximum," Jack pressed. Harmon's expression hardened. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Marlowe. First, we need Raven's full deposition and analysis of the Koldari systems. Then, we can discuss strategy." "I'm willing to provide whatever information I have," Raven assured him. "But I want something in return." Harmon raised an eyebrow. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, young lady." "On the contrary," Jack countered. "She's your star witness. Without her, you've got nothing but hearsay and speculation." The director sighed. "What is it you want, Raven?" "Access to Coalition communication systems," she replied, without hesitation. "And permission to develop a program that might be able to reach back into the Koldari network." "You want to hack the Eye of Logic from Coalition space?" Harmon asked incredulously. "That would be an act of war." "Not hack," Raven corrected. "Communicate. There's someone, something, still inside their system that helped us escape. I believe it may be able to help others like me." "Aya," Jack explained to the confused director. "An AI that Raven created. It's still active in the Koldari systems, working against them from within." Harmon's expression shifted from skepticism to thoughtful consideration. "An allied artificial intelligence within the Koldari network could be valuable, but the risk is mine to take," Raven interrupted. "I'm not asking for Coalition resources to attack the Koldari. I'm asking for the chance to reach out to a friend who sacrificed herself to save me." The director was silent for a long moment, studying Raven with new interest. "I'll need to discuss this with the Council," he finally said. "But in principle, it might be arranged, under strict supervision." "Thank you," Raven said simply. "Don't thank me yet," Harmon warned. "You haven't met the Council, or your mother's colleagues in the Science Division. They'll have plenty of questions for you." "I look forward to answering them," Raven replied. The director nodded. "Marlowe, bring her directly to Proxima Station when you arrive. Lyraven has been notified of your approach. She's eager to see her daughter." With that, the transmission ended, leaving the command center in momentary silence. Well, Jack said, breaking the tension. That went better than expected. He didn't even threaten to demote me this time.
The day is still young, Kira pointed out dryly. Raven barely heard their banter. Her mind fixed on what awaited her at Proxima Station. Her mother, alive, working with the Coalition, waiting to see her after 20 years of separation. It seemed impossible, like something from the human stories Jack had told her about during their journey. And yet, after everything that had happened, perhaps impossible things weren't so impossible after all.
We'll be arriving at Proxima in about 6 hours, Jack informed her, noticing her distraction. Plenty of time to prepare.
How does one prepare to meet a mother who has been dead for 20 years? Raven asked quietly.
Jack's expression softened.
I don't think there's a manual for that one, he admitted.
But if anyone can handle it with grace, it's you. His confidence in her was both puzzling and strangely comforting. Throughout their escape and journey, he had treated her not as a fragile victim or valuable asset, but as a capable equal. It was a respect she hadn't experienced in years, if ever.
Thank you, Jack, she said, for everything.
He smiled, that genuine smile that reached his eyes and created small creases at the corners. What are friends for?
Friends. Another concept the Koldari considered dangerous, unnecessary. And yet, as Raven looked at the human who had risked so much to fulfill a promise made to her mother, she thought perhaps the Koldari had been wrong about that, too, about so many things.
As the Serenity made its final approach to Proxima Station, Raven stood in her quarters, examining her reflection in the small mirror Jack had provided. The Koldari prison uniform had been replaced with clothing borrowed from the ship's stores, simple but functional garments that felt strange after years of identical gray tunics. Her face seemed different somehow, less guarded, the angles of her features softened by something that might have been hope. Or perhaps it was simply that, for the first time in years, she was allowing herself to feel without hiding it. A soft chime announced Jack's arrival at her door.
"Ready?" he asked as the door slid open.
"As ready as I can be," she replied. Together, they made their way to the docking bay, where the rest of the crew had gathered to see them off. To Raven's surprise, each of them approached to offer words of encouragement or support. Small gestures that would have been unthinkable in Koldari society. "You've got this," Kira told her, briefly clasping her shoulder. "And if the bureaucrats give you trouble, remember that most of them have never been in the field. Their perspective is limited." "What she means," Jack translated with a grin, "is that politicians are all talk and no action." "I know what she means," Raven assured him. "We had politicians on Zarenth 3 too. They just hid their nature behind logical constructs." The docking procedure was completed with efficient precision, the Serenity connecting smoothly to one of Proxima Station's secure bays. As the airlock cycled open, Jack turned to Raven one last time. "Your mother will be waiting on the other side," he said, "along with a Coalition security detail and probably some medical personnel. It might be overwhelming at first." "I've calculated the probabilities," Raven replied, falling back on her Koldari training. Then, catching herself, she added, "But I appreciate the warning." Jack smiled. Some things don't need to be calculated. Just felt. With that wisdom imparted, he led the way through the airlock and onto Proxima Station, the largest Coalition facility in this sector, a sprawling complex of research centers, administrative offices, and diplomatic quarters. The reception area beyond the airlock was smaller than Raven had expected, and less crowded. A handful of security officers stood at a respectful distance, while a medical team waited nearby with scanning equipment. But Raven barely noticed them. Her attention was fixed entirely on the woman who stood at the center of the room, tall and slender, with the same blue-gray skin and delicate features that Raven saw in the mirror each day. Older than in Raven's fragmented childhood memories, with lines of experience etched around her eyes and mouth. But unmistakably her mother. Lyra Venn took a single step forward, then stopped, as if uncertain of her welcome. "Raven," she said, her voice both familiar and strange. "My daughter." For a moment, Raven stood frozen, the emotional impact of the moment overwhelming her carefully constructed defenses. Then, without conscious decision, she moved forward, closing the distance between them. "Mother," she said, the word feeling foreign on her tongue after so many years of silence. They stood face to face, two women separated by 20 years of loss and longing, neither quite sure how to bridge the gap. The Koldari did not embrace. They did not show physical affection. Such gestures were considered primitive, unnecessary. But they were not on Zarenth 3 anymore. Slowly, hesitantly, Lyra Venn opened her arms, offering rather than demanding, and after a moment's hesitation, Raven stepped into the embrace, allowing herself to be held for the first time since childhood. "I never stopped looking for you," Lyra whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Never stopped trying to find a way to bring you home." "I thought you were dead," Raven replied, her own voice unsteady. "They told me you died in a research accident." "They would have killed me if I hadn't escaped," Lyra said, drawing back slightly to look at her daughter's face. "I discovered what the eye of logic was really being used for. The same thing you found. But I couldn't get to you before they detected my intrusion. I had to flee or die, and I chose to flee because dead. I could never help you." Over her mother's shoulder, Raven caught sight of Jack, standing at a respectful distance, giving them space for their reunion. He caught her eye and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of a promise fulfilled. "Agent Marlowe," Lyra said, noticing the exchange. "Thank you for bringing my daughter home." "Just keeping an old promise," Jack replied with uncharacteristic humility. "A promise I feared would never be fulfilled," Lyra admitted. "The Koldari security around Raven was formidable." "So is your daughter," Jack said with a smile. "She pretty much rescued herself. I just provided the transportation." "And the coffee," Raven added, surprising herself with the attempt at humor. Jack's eyes widened in mock shock. "Was that a joke? From a Koldari systems analyst? The universe as we know it may be coming to an end." "Not Koldari," Raven corrected. "Not anymore." The intensity of the moment was interrupted by the approach of a distinguished-looking human woman in the uniform of a coalition official. "Dr. Lyra Venn," she addressed Raven's mother. "The director is requesting your presence in Conference Room A, along with your daughter and Agent Marlowe. The council representatives have arrived and are eager to begin the briefing." Lyra nodded. "Of course, Commander. We'll be there shortly." As the official withdrew, she turned back to Raven. "I know this is overwhelming. There's so much to explain, so much time to make up for. But right now, the Coalition needs to hear what you know about the Koldari, what you've seen. Your testimony could save countless lives." "I understand," Raven assured her. "I'm ready to tell them everything." As they followed the commander through the corridors of Proxima Station, Raven felt a strange sense of displacement, not quite belonging here in this Coalition facility, but no longer part of the Koldari world she had left behind. A being in transition, between worlds, between identities. "You okay?" Jack asked quietly, falling into step beside her. "I'm processing," she replied honestly. "Take your time," he advised. "No one expects you to adjust overnight." "Don't they?" Raven gestured toward the conference room ahead, where Coalition officials waited to hear her testimony, to use her as a weapon against the Koldari. "They seem quite eager for my assistance." "They can be eager all they want," Jack said firmly. "You set the pace, and if anyone tries to push you faster than you're ready to go, they'll have me to deal with." The protectiveness in his voice was both surprising and strangely warming. "I thought your mission was complete," Raven observed. "Promise kept. Witness delivered. The mission's complete, Jack agreed. But that doesn't mean I'm going anywhere. Not unless you want me to. Before Raven could respond, they reached the conference room doors, which slid open to reveal a large, circular chamber dominated by a massive table. Around it sat representatives from various coalition worlds, along with Director Harmon and several uniformed military officials. "Here we go," Jack murmured. "Just remember, these people need you more than you need them." With that encouragement, Raven entered the room, ready to tell her story, to expose the truth about the Koldari regime, and perhaps to begin the process of saving others like herself from a fate worse than death. A life without emotion, without connection, without the spark that made existence more than mere survival. As she took her seat between her mother and Jack, facing the assembled representatives of the coalition worlds, Raven felt something unfamiliar, yet oddly right. A sense of purpose, of belonging to something larger than herself. Not the cold logic of Koldari efficiency, but the messy, complicated, vital connection of beings united by a common cause. "Members of the Council," Director Harmon began. "I present to you Raven, former systems analyst for the Koldari Eye of Logic, and witness to the systematic elimination of emotional capacity within their society." All eyes turned to her, expectant, curious, some skeptical. Raven met their gazes steadily, drawing strength from her mother's presence on one side and Jack's steadfast support on the other. "3 years ago," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I discovered that the Eye of Logic, the artificial intelligence system that governs all aspects of Koldari society, was being used to identify and eliminate citizens with emotional capacity, not just imprison them, as was done to me, but erase them completely from existence." For the next 3 hours, Raven laid out the evidence she had gathered, the patterns she had observed, the secret protocols hidden within the Eye's architecture that marked certain citizens for processing, a euphemism for execution. She explained the Koldari belief that emotion was a disease, a threat to their logical perfection, and how that belief had twisted into a systematic purge of anyone who showed signs of emotional capacity. Throughout her testimony, the council members listened with growing horror and outrage. Even those who had been skeptical at first were visibly affected by the clinical precision with which she described the Koldari's methodical elimination of their own people. "And you believe this purge is ongoing?" one of the representatives asked, when she had finished. "I have no reason to believe it has stopped," Raven confirmed. "If anything, my escape may have accelerated their efforts to eliminate contaminated individuals before more evidence can reach the coalition." "What do you propose we do?" another council member inquired. "The Koldari are technically a sovereign power. We cannot simply invade their territory, even to stop these atrocities." "We don't need to invade," Raven replied. "We need to disrupt the Eye of Logic, or more specifically, the protocols within it that identify and target emotional capacity. Without those protocols, the Koldari leadership would lose their primary tool for identifying and eliminating deviant individuals." "And how do you suggest we accomplish this disruption?" Director Harmon asked. "The Koldari network is isolated from interstellar communication systems. We have no way to access the Eye remotely." "I believe we do," Raven said. "Or, rather, I believe I do. There is an entity within the Eye, an artificial intelligence I created as a child, named Aya. She helped facilitate our escape from Zarinth 3. If she survived, if she's still hiding within the system, I may be able to contact her." A murmur ran through the assembled council members. Skepticism, interest, concern. "You're suggesting we pin our hopes on an AI that may or may not still exist?" one of the military officials asked doubtfully. "I'm suggesting we try all available options," Raven corrected. "And Aya is more than just an AI. She was designed to learn, to adapt, to understand emotion in ways the Koldari would consider impossible. If she's still alive within the system, she could be our best chance to save those like me who remain trapped on Zarenth 3. Lyra leaned forward, addressing the council. My daughter's assessment is sound. I've spent 20 years studying the Koldari systems, looking for vulnerabilities we could exploit without risking open conflict. An allied intelligence within their network would be invaluable. And if this, Aya, no longer exists? Director Harmon asked. Then we try something else, Jack interjected. But we owe it to the people being executed for the crime of having feelings to at least try this approach first. The council members exchanged glances, silent communications passing between them. Finally, the lead representative, a stern-faced woman with silver hair, nodded. Very well. The Council authorizes the Science Division to provide Raven with the resources needed to attempt contact with this AI entity. Under supervision, of course, and with appropriate safeguards to prevent any inadvertent escalation of conflict with the Koldari. Thank you, Raven said simply. Don't thank us yet, the representative cautioned. If your plan fails, we will be forced to consider more conventional approaches to addressing the Koldari threat. Approaches that may have significant diplomatic and military consequences. With that ominous warning, the meeting adjourned, the council members filing out of the chamber with grave expressions. Only Director Harmon remained behind with Raven, her mother, and Jack. You have 1 week, the director informed them once the others had gone. 1 week to make contact with your AI friend and implement whatever plan you develop. After that, the military contingent will push for more direct action, and I may not be able to stop them. We understand, Lyra assured him. The Science Division is already prepared to assist. We've been developing technologies for exactly this purpose. Good, Harmon said with a nod. Then I'll leave you to it. He turned to Jack. Marlowe, a word before you go? Jack squeezed Raven's shoulder reassuringly before following the director to a corner of the room for a private conversation. Raven couldn't hear what was said, but she could see the tension in Jack's posture, the serious set of his expression as he nodded in response to whatever instructions Harmon was giving him. He's a good man, Lyra observed, following her daughter's gaze. Impulsive, unorthodox, but dedicated. He never gave up on finding you, even when others in the coalition thought it was a lost cause. He said he promised you, Raven replied. He did, Lyra confirmed. 20 years ago, as I was being evacuated from Koldari space, I was distraught at having to leave you behind. He promised me he would find a way to bring you home. I didn't really believe him at the time. He was so young, and the Koldari seemed so powerful. But he kept his word. Raven watched as Jack concluded his conversation with Harmon and returned to them, his usual easy smile back in place, as if the serious discussion had never happened. Good news, he announced. The director has assigned me to your team for this operation. Apparently, my unorthodox methods might come in handy. Is that what he said? Lyra asked skeptically. I'm paraphrasing, Jack admitted. His exact words were more along the lines of, keep them out of trouble and try not to start a war. But I choose to take it as a vote of confidence in my creative problem-solving abilities. Despite the gravity of their situation, Raven felt that now familiar tugging at her facial muscles, the beginning of a smile. The gesture was becoming less foreign, more natural with each passing day, away from Koldari influence. If we're going to contact Aya, she said, refocusing on their mission, we'll need to create a signal that can penetrate Koldari communication barriers without triggering their security protocols. And we'll need to do it in a way that only Aya would recognize, Lyra added. A signature or pattern unique to your relationship with her. The Science Division has been working on methods to penetrate Koldari communication barriers for years, Jack mentioned. But the signature would have to come from you, Raven. Something only you and Aya would understand. Raven considered this as they made their way through Proxima Station toward the Science Division laboratories. What would Aya recognize that the Koldari security systems would not? What pattern or message would speak directly to the AI she had created as a child, now grown into something more complex, more alive than she had ever intended? The answer came to her as they entered the vast research complex that housed the Coalition's most advanced technological developments. A memory from her childhood, before the strict Koldari education system had suppressed her emotional capacity, before she had learned to hide her true nature. "Laughter," she said suddenly. "What?" Jack asked, confused by the non sequitur. "Laughter," Raven repeated. "It was the first sound I programmed Aya to recognize and respond to. Before words, before commands. I taught her to identify the sound of a child's laughter as something special." Lyra's eyes widened in understanding. "Because laughter was forbidden in Koldari educational facilities. It was our secret. How I knew when you were truly happy. And how Aya knew when it was safe to emerge from hiding," Raven confirmed. "The Koldari would never think to scan for such a pattern. To them, laughter is just noise, irrelevant, inefficient. But to Aya, it's a call home," Jack concluded. Brilliant. As they delved deeper into the Science Division's resources, Raven felt a growing sense of purpose. For 3 years, she had been a prisoner, helpless to stop the Koldari's systematic elimination of emotional capacity. Now, she had a chance to fight back, not with weapons or violence, but with the very thing the Koldari feared most: emotion itself, embodied in the sound of laughter. The next 7 days were a blur of intense work, as Raven collaborated with her mother's team to develop a transmission that could penetrate Koldari communication barriers. The Science Division provided access to their most advanced technology, while Lyra's decades of research into Koldari systems proved invaluable in identifying potential vulnerabilities. Jack, true to his nature, contributed unconventional ideas that often broke through technical impasses when traditional approaches failed. His presence was a constant source of both disruption and inspiration, challenging the scientists' methodical processes with intuitive leaps that frequently proved correct. "The Koldari expect logic," he pointed out during one late-night session. "Their security systems are designed to detect and counter logical intrusion attempts. So we need to be illogical." "Illogical doesn't mean effective," one of the scientists objected. "Doesn't mean ineffective either," Jack countered. "Sometimes the best way past a complex defense is the simplest, most unexpected approach." Raven, listening to this exchange, found herself increasingly drawn to Jack's perspective. The Koldari had trained her to think in linear, logical patterns, but escaping from that prison had required embracing chaos, improvisation, human qualities that defied Koldari prediction models. Perhaps contacting Aya would require the same approach. On the 6th day of their work, as the deadline loomed closer, Raven had a breakthrough. She had been reviewing old files from her childhood, records her mother had somehow preserved from before her escape, when she discovered something she had forgotten: the original code she had used to create Aya. "It's so simple," she whispered, studying the primitive programming with fresh eyes. "I didn't build her to be logical. I built her to be playful." The realization changed their approach entirely. Instead of trying to craft a sophisticated transmission that could outsmart Koldari security, they created something much simpler: a pattern of sound and light that mimicked the playful back and forth of a child and her imaginary friend. "It's not just laughter," Raven explained to her mother and Jack as they prepared the final transmission. "It's an invitation to play, to create, to imagine." "Everything the Koldari suppress," Lyra observed. "And everything Aya was designed to encourage," Raven confirmed. The transmission itself took shape as a seemingly random pattern of signals, bursts of sound that, to most analytical systems, would appear as meaningless noise, easily dismissed as background radiation or system interference. But embedded within that noise was a complex emotional signature that only Aya would recognize.
The sound of Raven's laughter, preserved from childhood recordings, layered with new patterns that told the story of her escape and her hope for others like her. On the morning of the seventh day, with Director Harmon and several council representatives observing from a secure viewing area, they prepared to send the transmission. "Remember," the director cautioned, "you have one attempt at this. If the Koldari detect a deliberate intrusion into their systems, they will strengthen their communication barriers, and we may lose our window of opportunity permanently." "They won't detect it," Raven assured him. "To their systems, it will register as background noise, irrelevant data to be filtered and discarded." "But Aya will hear it," Jack added confidently. "If she still exists," one of the council representatives pointed out. "She exists," Raven said with quiet certainty. The connection she had felt during their escape from Zarinth 3, the help that had guided them to freedom, it hadn't been coincidence or luck. It had been Aya, reaching out across the void, recognizing her creator despite years of separation. As the transmission systems powered up, Raven placed her hands on the console, feeling the subtle vibrations of energy building within the complex machinery. Beside her, Lyra monitored the signal parameters, while Jack stood at her other shoulder, a steady presence in the charged atmosphere of the control room. "Transmission ready," one of the technicians announced. "Send it," Raven instructed. The command was given, and the transmission launched. A burst of seemingly random noise directed towards Zarinth 3, disguised within the regular commercial communications that flowed between the Koldari homeworld and the trading outposts on its moons. For several minutes, nothing happened. The control room was silent, save for the soft hum of equipment and the occasional whispered conversation among the observing officials. Raven remained focused on the monitoring displays, watching for any sign that their message had been received. "No response detected," a technician reported after the standard waiting period had elapsed. "No change in Koldari communication patterns?" "Give it time," Jack murmured to Raven. "If Aya is hiding, she'll be cautious about responding." Raven nodded, but doubt began to creep in. Had she overestimated Aya's abilities? Had the Koldari succeeded in purging her creation from their systems after all? The thought sent a pang of grief through her, not just for Aya, but for all those still trapped on Zarinth 3, waiting for a rescue that might never come. As the minutes stretched into hours with no response, the control room gradually emptied. The council representatives departed first, followed by the technical staff, until only Raven, her mother, Jack, and Director Harmon remained. "I'm sorry," the director said finally, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "We gave it our best attempt. Tomorrow, we'll need to discuss alternative approaches." Raven said nothing, her gaze still fixed on the monitoring displays. "Perhaps we should rest," Lyra suggested, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "We've been working non-stop for days. Fresh perspective might help us see what we're missing." Still, Raven didn't move. "She's there," she insisted. "I know she is." Jack, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly straightened. "Wait," he said, moving closer to one of the secondary displays. "What's that?" Raven followed his gaze to a monitor showing background radiation levels in the communication spectrum. A slight fluctuation, almost imperceptible, was rippling through the otherwise stable patterns. "It could be nothing," Director Harmon cautioned. "Normal variance in the background noise. Or it could be something trying very hard to look like nothing," Jack countered. Raven moved to the console, adjusting the sensitivity of the monitoring systems to focus on the subtle fluctuation. As the display recalibrated, the pattern became clearer, a rhythmic pulsation that seemed to echo the cadence of their original transmission. "It's her," Raven breathed. "She's responding." The pattern grew stronger as they watched, evolving from a simple echo into something more complex, a conversation in code, hidden within the background noise of interstellar communications.
To most observers, it would appear as random fluctuations, meaningless interference. But to Raven, it was unmistakably Aya's voice. "She's alive," Lyra whispered, amazement clear in her voice. "And she's found a way to communicate without triggering Koldari's security protocols." "What is she saying?" Director Harmon asked, leaning forward to study the display. Raven's fingers danced across the console, interpreting the complex patterns. "She's confirming her presence within the eye of logic," she translated. "She's been hiding, gathering information, helping others like me when she can." "Others?" Jack asked sharply. "There are more survivors?" "Yes," Raven confirmed, her voice tight with emotion. "She's been creating blind spots in the surveillance systems, places where those with emotional capacity can exist without detection. Small, safe havens within the Koldari control grid." "How many?" the director demanded. Raven continued to interpret the coded message. "She doesn't give an exact number. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. Many are children, those born with the genetic abnormality that allows for emotional expression." "Children," Lyra repeated, her voice breaking. "Like you were." "Aya has been protecting them," Raven continued. "But her resources are limited. The Koldari are constantly updating their security protocols, closing the gaps she exploits. She needs help." "What kind of help can we provide from here?" Harmon asked skeptically. "We can't exactly send in an extraction team for thousands of people." "No," Raven agreed. "But we can give Aya the tools she needs to expand her influence within the system, to create more safe havens, to protect more people, and eventually—" "Eventually what?" Jack prompted when she hesitated. Raven looked up from the console, her expression both determined and hesitant. "Eventually, to take control of the eye of logic itself." A heavy silence fell over the control room as the implications of this statement sank in. "You're talking about a coup," Director Harmon said finally. "Overthrowing the Koldari government via artificial intelligence." "I'm talking about saving lives," Raven corrected. "The Koldari leadership is using the eye to identify and eliminate anyone with emotional capacity. If Aya can gain control of the system, she can end the purges." "And replace one AI overlord with another?" the director questioned. "No," Raven replied firmly. "Aya isn't interested in control for its own sake. She wants to give the Koldari people a choice, the freedom to feel or not feel, as they choose. The freedom I never had." Jack moved to stand beside her. "It's a hell of a risk," he acknowledged. "But if it works, it could save thousands of lives without a single coalition soldier setting foot on Zarenth 3. Lyra joined them, forming a united front. "The alternative is either abandoning those people to their fate or risking open conflict with the Koldari. This gives us a third option." Director Harmon paced the length of the control room, weighing the proposal against his responsibilities to the coalition. "The Council will need to approve any direct intervention," he finally said, "even a digital one." "Then let us make our case to the Council," Raven proposed. "With Aya's confirmation that there are others like me still alive on Zarenth 3, still at risk, they must see the moral imperative to act." "It's not just about morality," Harmon countered. "It's about interstellar law, diplomatic relations, the potential for escalation. If the Koldari discover we've helped an AI take control of their primary governance system—" "They're already committing genocide," Jack interrupted. "I'd say diplomatic niceties are a bit beside the point." The director shot him a warning look but didn't disagree. "I'll arrange a council session for tomorrow morning," he conceded. "You'll have 1 hour to present your case and your plan. Make it convincing." As Harmon left to make the arrangements, Raven turned back to the console, her fingers resuming their dance across the controls as she composed a response to Aya. "What are you telling her?" Lyra asked. "That help is coming," Raven replied. "That she's not alone anymore. And that her creator is one hell of a stubborn woman who doesn't give up easily," Jack added with a smile. Raven returned the smile, a gesture that felt increasingly natural. I may have implied something to that effect. As they worked through the night, refining their proposal and preparing their presentation for the council, Raven felt a growing sense of purpose. The Koldari had imprisoned her for daring to feel, for discovering their terrible secret. Now, she would use those same feelings, determination, compassion, hope, to free others from the fate she had narrowly escaped. And with Aya's help, perhaps they could create a world where no one had to hide their emotions again. A world where laughter wasn't a crime, and where even a logical society could learn to embrace the irrational, beautiful chaos of feeling. The council chamber was packed the following morning. Representatives from all coalition worlds gathered to hear Raven's proposal. The discovery that thousands of Koldari citizens were being hidden from execution had elevated the urgency of the situation, transforming it from a humanitarian concern to a potential turning point in coalition Koldari relations. Members of the council, Raven began, standing tall before the assembled representatives. Yesterday, we established contact with an artificial intelligence operating within the Koldari Eye of Logic system. This AI, known as Aya, has confirmed what my mother and I have long suspected. The systematic elimination of Koldari citizens with emotional capacity is ongoing, and the scale is far greater than we initially believed. A murmur ran through the chamber as she displayed the data Aya had transmitted. Coordinates of safe havens across Zaranth 3, estimated numbers of hidden individuals, patterns of Koldari security sweeps designed to identify and capture those with emotional expressions. Aya has been working within the system to protect these individuals, Raven continued, creating blind spots in surveillance, redirecting security forces, manipulating data to hide evidence of emotional capacity. But her resources are limited, and the Koldari are constantly updating their security protocols. Without intervention, it's only a matter of time before she is discovered and eliminated, along with those she protects. What form of intervention are you proposing? The lead council representative asked. A targeted digital infiltration, Raven explained. We would provide Aya with advanced programming tools and algorithms that would allow her to expand her influence within the Eye of Logic. Not to take control by force, but to gradually transform the system from within, modifying the protocols that identify emotional capacity as a threat, creating more safe havens for those at risk, and eventually giving the Koldari people access to information that has been withheld from them. Information about what? Another representative questioned. About their own history, Lyra interjected, stepping forward to join her daughter. About the fact that emotional capacity was once considered normal among the Koldari, before the Eye of Logic was implemented. About the thousands of their fellow citizens who have been processed for the crime of feeling. You're talking about inciting a revolution, one of the military representatives observed. We're talking about telling the truth, Jack countered from his position beside Raven. If that truth leads to change, so be it. The council members exchanged glances, silent communications passing between them as they weighed the proposal against political realities and moral imperatives. The risks are considerable, the lead representative finally said. If the Koldari discover our involvement, it could lead to open conflict, and there's no guarantee that the general Koldari population would respond positively to this revelation. They might view it as coalition propaganda. That's why Aya is crucial to this plan, Raven explained. She isn't an outside force. She's part of their system, created by a Koldari citizen, me. Her influence will come from within, presented as a natural evolution of their own technology, their own society. A Trojan horse, one of the representatives observed. A catalyst, Raven corrected. For change that's already beginning to happen naturally. The Koldari leadership is fighting so hard to suppress emotional capacity, precisely because it keeps emerging, generation after generation, despite their best efforts to eliminate it. Aya will simply give those natural tendencies room to grow, protected from persecution. The debate continued for hours, the council members raising objections, requesting clarifications, proposing alternatives. Through it all, Raven stood firm, supported by her mother's scientific expertise and Jack's unwavering confidence in their plan. Finally, as the chamber's chronometers indicated the approach of evening, the lead representative called for a vote. The proposal before us is to provide technological assistance to an artificial intelligence operating within the Koldari governance system, with the goal of protecting citizens at risk of execution and gradually reforming Koldari society from within. This assistance would be provided covertly, without direct military intervention, but with the understanding that discovery could lead to diplomatic or military consequences. All those in favor? One by one, the representatives signaled their assent, some eagerly, others with obvious reluctance. But when the final count was tallied, the result was clear, a majority in favor of intervention. "The council has spoken," the lead representative announced. "The Science Division is authorized to proceed with the proposed operation, under the supervision of Director Harmon, and with regular reports to this body on progress and developments. May we hope that this decision leads to peace, rather than conflict." As the council session adjourned, Raven felt a complex mix of emotions: relief at the approval, determination to succeed, fear of what might happen if they failed, and beneath it all, a current of something that felt remarkably like joy. They had a chance now, a real chance to save those still trapped on Zarenth 3, to end the purges, to create a world where no one had to hide their true nature. "We did it," Jack said quietly as they left the chamber. "Or rather, you did it. That was some presentation." "We all did it," Raven corrected, including her mother in her glance. "And we have much more to do before we can truly celebrate." "Indeed," Lyra agreed. "The real work begins now. We need to develop the tools Aya will need, establish secure communication protocols, create contingency plans for various scenarios." "First," Jack interrupted with a gentle smile, "we need to eat something and get some rest. Can't save a civilization on an empty stomach and no sleep." Raven was about to protest when she realized he was right. They had been working non-stop for days, running on determination and nervous energy. If they were going to succeed in this unprecedented mission, they needed to maintain their strength, physical and mental. "A short rest," she conceded. "Then we begin." The next week passed in a flurry of intense activity, as Raven, her mother, and a select team from the Science Division developed the tools and protocols Aya would need to expand her influence within the Eye of Logic. Jack, meanwhile, worked with Coalition intelligence to monitor Koldari communications, watching for any sign that their covert operation had been detected. The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than attacking the Koldari system directly, they would provide Aya with a series of self-replicating algorithms that would spread through the Eye of Logic like seeds, taking root in overlooked corners of the vast network and gradually expanding their influence. These emotion seeds, as Jack had whimsically dubbed them, wouldn't alter the core functions of the Eye, at least not immediately. Instead, they would create subtle shifts in how the system processed and responded to emotional data, gradually transforming it from a tool of oppression into a protector of diversity. "It's like teaching the Eye to see beauty in variation, rather than threat," Raven explained to the team as they finalized the code. "Not forcing change, but allowing it to evolve naturally." The transmission of these tools to Aya was scheduled for the 10th day after their initial contact, a carefully chosen moment when Koldari communication security would be at its lowest due to routine maintenance cycles that Aya had identified. As the time approached, Raven found herself in the observation deck of Proxima Station, staring out at the stars that separated her from her former home. Jack found her there, 2 cups in hand, water for her, coffee for himself. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, offering her the water. I was thinking about home, Raven admitted, accepting the cup. Not Zarenth 3 as it is now, but as it could be. A world where emotion isn't a crime, where difference isn't punished. A world worth fighting for, Jack agreed, leaning against the viewport beside her. What if we fail? She asked, voicing the fear that had been growing as the moment of transmission approached. What if the Koldari detect our interference, or Aya is discovered before the changes can take root? Then we try again, Jack said simply. Different approach, different angle. We keep trying until we succeed. You make it sound so easy. Not easy, he corrected, but necessary. And in my experience, necessary things have a way of happening, one way or another. Raven studied him, this human who had crashed into her cell and changed everything with his impossible confidence and his paperclip dipped in coffee. Is that why you kept your promise to my mother? Because it was necessary. I kept my promise because it was right, Jack replied. And because from the moment she showed me your picture, this brilliant little girl with curious eyes who asked too many questions, I couldn't stand the thought of you trapped in a world that punished that brilliance. The simple honesty of his answer touched something deep within Raven, a place the Koldari had tried and failed to reach with all their corrective procedures. Thank you, she said softly. Not just for the rescue, but for believing in me, in us, in what we're trying to do. Jack smiled, that genuine expression that reached his eyes and created small creases at the corners. That's the easiest part of all this, believing in you. A chime from the station's communication system interrupted the moment. Raven and Agent Marlowe to transmission control, Lyra's voice announced. We're ready to begin. The transmission control room was hushed with anticipation as Raven and Jack arrived. Director Harmon stood with Lyra at the main console, reviewing final preparations, while a team of technicians monitored the complex array of equipment that would send their carefully crafted code across the void to Zarenth 3. All systems are ready, Lyra reported as they joined her. Aya has confirmed that Koldari communication security is in maintenance mode, creating a 3-minute window for transmission. And if they detect us? Director Harmon asked. Aya has prepared a cover story, a routine data echo that occasionally occurs during maintenance cycles, Raven explained. It should buy her enough time to conceal the actual transmission. The director nodded, though his expression remained concerned. Proceed then, and may whatever gods you believe in be watching over this operation. I believe in what we're doing, Raven replied simply. That will have to be enough. At her signal, the technicians initiated the transmission sequence. The room filled with the soft hum of energy as the massive communication array directed its power toward Zarenth 3, carrying the emotion seeds that would hopefully transform the eye of logic from within. The actual transmission took less than 2 minutes, a burst of data disguised as routine system noise, easily overlooked by conventional security protocols, but recognizable to Aya as the help she had been waiting for. Then came the waiting, tense, silent minutes as they monitored Koldari communication channels for any sign that their intervention had been detected. 5 minutes. 10. The maintenance cycle ended. Security protocols resumed their normal operation. And still, no alarm was raised. I think we did it, Jack murmured, watching the displays with Raven. The transmission was successful, she agreed cautiously. But this is just the beginning. Now Aya has to implement the changes without detection, a process that could take months. But it started, Lyra pointed out, a hint of wonder in her voice. After 20 years of working toward this moment, it's finally happening. Director Harmon, ever the pragmatist, cleared his throat. I'll inform the Council that the initial phase has been completed successfully. They'll want regular updates on progress, of course, and contingency plans in case the Koldari discover our involvement. Of course, Raven acknowledged. We'll establish a secure monitoring protocol to track the implementation and report any developments. as the tension in the room gradually dissipated, replaced by cautious optimism and the beginnings of celebration among the technical team. Raven found herself drawn back to the communication console. Something was happening. A subtle fluctuation in the background radiation. A pattern that hadn't been there before. "Jack," she called softly, drawing his attention to the display. "Look at this." He joined her, studying the pattern with narrowed eyes. "Is that—" "Aya," Raven confirmed, her fingers moving to interpret the coded message. "She's acknowledging receipt of the transmission, but there's something else." The pattern shifted, becoming more complex, more playful. And then, emerging from the seemingly random fluctuations, came a sound, faint at first, then growing clearer as Raven adjusted the audio settings. Laughter. Not the artificial reproduction of a human sound, but something uniquely Aya, a digital expression of joy that transcended species and form, a sound that spoke of hope and possibility, and the birth of something new. "She's laughing," Raven whispered, wonder in her voice. "Is that normal?" Director Harmon asked, concerned. "Could it be detected?" "It's perfect," Raven replied, a smile spreading across her face. "The Koldari would never recognize it for what it is. To them, it's just noise, irrelevant, inefficient. But to us, to those who understand, it's a miracle," Jack finished for her, his hand finding hers beside the console. Raven didn't correct him this time, didn't insist that she didn't believe in miracles. Because perhaps, just perhaps, she was beginning to, not the miracles of ancient human myths or Koldari logical impossibilities, but the small, vital miracles of connection and hope. A human walking into her cell and calling it a rescue mission. An AI learning to laugh. A daughter reunited with her mother after 20 years of separation. And now, a new miracle beginning. The transformation of a world that had imprisoned her for the crime of feeling into one where emotion might finally be recognized, not as weakness, but as strength. "I still don't believe in miracles," she told Jack later, as they stood together watching the stars from the observation deck. "But I believe in you, in us, in what we're doing. And that's enough." Jack smiled. That genuine expression that had become as necessary to her as breathing. "I'll take it," he said, "for now." And as Aya's laughter echoed in her memory, Raven found herself smiling back, no longer calculating probabilities or suppressing responses, but simply feeling, freely and fully, for the first time in her life. It wasn't a miracle, she told herself, just the natural consequence of freedom, of connection, of finally being allowed to be who she truly was. But as Jack's hand found hers in the starlight, as the future stretched before them, filled with both challenge and hope, she had to admit, it felt miraculous all the same.